Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to our Friday Alzheimer Association Facebook Live. And I'm Dr. Marcy Edelman, a clinical psychologist in San Francisco and a member of the board of the Alzheimer Association of Northern California and Northern Nevada, and the co-founder of Open House, and LGBT senior serving nonprofit here in San Francisco. And I'm joined by Arthur Chen, the LGBT project manager and family care specialist for the Alzheimer Association. Good afternoon, Arthur.
Good afternoon, Marcy.
And Carrie Shell, let me see here, the Open House manager of support services. Afternoon, Carrie.
Good afternoon, Marcy. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you again. Thank you both for joining me this afternoon. We're going to wait a little bit. Hopefully some folks will be joining us, more folks will be joining us soon. Maybe what we can do while we're waiting is, Arthur, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Arthur Chen. I'm the LGBTQ project manager and family care specialist with the Alzheimer's Association. So my background is actually also in clinical psychology. So before I moved here in San Francisco back in 2016, I actually practiced as a clinical psychologist back in Hong Kong, where I work with people living with dementia and other neurocognitive disorders. While I was also engaged in diversity and inclusion. So, I was very fortunate, since I moved here, I was able to get a job that I'm really passionate about, while serving the LGBTQ and the Asian and Pacific Islander community, while doing some sort of care and support work for families living with dementia. So, yeah.
Well, thank you, Arthur. Arthur says he's fortunate to get a job, but we're fortunate to have Arthur and his expertise.
Thank you so much, Marcy.
And Carrie, would you please tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So my name's Carrie Shell. I am the manager of community support services at Open House. My background, I've been working in social services for about 20 years, and most of my experience for the first about 15 years was working in community mental health with communities that are unhoused. And so a lot of the first part of my career was shelters, supported housing, residential treatment programs. And then I transitioned into working more specifically in supported housing and working with LGBTQ seniors. The way that I got into working with LGBTQ seniors was I was the care manager for Phyllis Lyon, who was a lesbian activist along with her partner, Del Martin, who founded the first lesbian organizations in the United States. And through the relationship with her, I was able to understand a lot more firsthand about the struggles of LGBTQ seniors and how specific our needs are when we age, as opposed to other people.
Well, thank you, Carrie, and also thank you again. I know what wonderful care you took of Phyllis, and I know the entire community is in your debt for doing that. She was much loved, and we wouldn't even be here today, the three of us, if not for the work of Phyllis and Del, right? So thank you, Carrie.
Welcome.
All right then. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Today we're going to be discussing the impact of COVID on LGBTQ seniors and the kind of tips, and our two experts here will be giving us tips on how best to support our caregivers and LGBTQ seniors during this time of COVID and through the holidays and hopefully beyond. You know, the holidays will shortly be with us, and the holidays can be a challenging time for some of us. But this year they may be especially difficult after enduring 8 months of isolating in our homes. And I think it's been hard on all of us, for sure. Many people are feeling, though, some level of COVID malaise, or blues, if you will, and are eager to spend the holidays with people they love. But this may not be possible, especially for those considered at high risk. And adults, those would be adults with chronic illnesses and those that are living with dementia. So for those joining us today, let me just take a minute again to say that I'm Dr. Marcy Edelman, and our two experts today are Carrie and Arthur Chen. Carrie from Open House, Arthur Chen from the Alzheimer Association, to talk about the impact of COVID on LGBTQ seniors and their caregivers, and to give us tips going through the holidays and beyond on how to best take care of ourselves and each other. And oh, by the way, if I want to give you a hotline, there's a hotline that you can see, I guess it appears on the screen, on COVID resources. It's a 24/7 hotline. I think it should be up there somewhere on the screen. And now that we've had a chance to introduce the experts in the group, I want to give you a little bit of context before we get into our discussion and about LGBT seniors here in San Francisco. So there are about approximately 25,000 LGBTQ seniors living in San Francisco. And we are a resilient population, but we also have unique challenges and a history that can contribute to increased risk of isolation and emotional distress. And these challenges are that LGBT seniors are 3 times less likely to have children and more likely to live alone and to be single than their heterosexual peers. In San Francisco, 60% of LGBTQ older adults live alone, compared to 30% of their heterosexual peers. That's unusually high even for California or the rest of the country, but it's typically throughout the country and California, LGBTQ older adults have higher rates of living alone compared to their heterosexual peers. And many of us are estranged from our families of origin. So of course, all these unique characteristics can create for some people a challenge around staying connected and engaged, socially engaged throughout the year, but especially during the holidays. So maybe we should just get started now with the questions. And I'm going to direct any one of these questions to either one of you, Arthur and Carrie, but then the other one, please one of you just feel free to jump in and talk as well. And hopefully we can get a discussion going here. So let's see here. So living with Alzheimer's and caring for someone living with the disease is not easy, but LGBTQ individuals have unique challenges. What are those challenges?
I can go first.
Yes, please, Arthur.
So given their socio-political oppression and trauma LGBTQ older adults have been through in their lives, many of them have lost trust in healthcare and social providers. A lot of them are reluctant to seek professional help for their fear of being discriminated against and not receiving the appropriate care they need. And many LGBTQ individuals living with dementia share negative and undeserving stigmas. For example, being devalued as a person, being misgendered, being targeted for negative labels or verbal abuse, being socially isolated because they are an unknown to staff, being gossiped about and left out of enjoyable events. And for LGBTQ caregivers, they're oftentimes designated as the caregiver for elders in the family, regardless of whether they are willing and prepared to take up the role. And on the other hand, things become even more challenging when an LGBTQ individual is caring for another LGBTQ individual living with dementia because of all these legal issues. As we all know, many LGBTQ couples are not necessarily legally married, and therefore the caregivers may not have the legal authority to make financial and healthcare decisions on behalf of the person living with dementia. And as we know, some LGBTQ individuals, they do not have a biological family, a partner, or children to rely on. And sometimes their friends become their caregivers. And for someone who cares for a friend living with dementia, they wouldn't even be eligible to take paid family leave to care for their friends. So all this issue could potentially cause significant psychological distress to LGBTQ caregivers and the person living with dementia.
Carrie, would you like to jump in here?
That was a very thorough explanation. Thank you, Arthur. Yeah, I mean, I think I would just echo some of what Arthur said and also highlight that LGBTQ seniors are more likely to live in poverty. If they're folks of color, they're more likely to live in poverty, be disconnected from families of origin. And just echo what Arthur was saying about chosen family being the primary caregivers a lot of the times for seniors who end up living alone and don't have anybody else to rely on.
I totally agree with you, Carrie, because it's like when we talk about like the LGBTQ community, we often think about like intersectionality, right? Like even though like within the LGBTQ community, like the oppression or the concerns could vastly different, right? Around like different ethnic groups or like different socioeconomic groups. So thank you for shedding light on that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
All right, Carrie, you want to start with the next question then? What changes have you seen in the people that you serve during COVID and when we were required to shelter in place?
A lot of the changes we've seen at Open House through our community is increased isolation. People aren't going out anymore. Some of our people haven't left their homes since March. So their isolation is pretty extreme. For some people, it's hard to talk on the phone or they don't have access to computers. So the digital divide is a huge issue that Open House is currently working to address in our community members. We have virtual programming, but not everybody has access to the internet. So that's something that's a huge need that we're noticing. And one of the ways that we're addressing some of the increased isolation and loneliness is to put extra effort into our Friendly Visitor Program, which is normally a volunteer program that visits people in their homes or out in the community. And now, of course, it's on the phone. And those phone calls mean a lot to people. Sometimes when you call someone and maybe you're calling them once a week, they haven't spoken to anybody since the last time you called them last week. So it really highlights how isolated and lonely people are, how, a lot of what I hear about in the media about the lack of touch that people are noticing is really true. A lot of seniors don't have physical touch in their life already. And now that they're not even getting the occasional hug from someone in their life, it's has a really profound effect on people's mental health. And while we can't provide that right now, we're doing lots of phone calls and also getting volunteers to deliver gift baskets for the holidays to people. And that's one way we're helping to bring community to people. We have about 600 gift baskets going out to people via volunteers between November and December to just let people know that we're thinking about them. We've also, along with Mercy Housing, brought hot meals to people who are food insecure for the holidays.
I definitely agree with Carrie. You know, for like social isolation, definitely causes like a lot of psychological distress and all this like mental health issues, right? When we oftentimes when we talk about you know, illnesses, we tend to take a biopsychosocial approach. So so social isolation also actually kind of lead to a regression in speech and language abilities, especially among folks living with dementia. And we have actually seen an increase in symptoms and advancement of dementia in clients who have previously only had mild dementia. It's especially because, you know, the social interaction piece is missing, right? They don't get the chance to talk, they don't get the chance to interact, and it's all these other issues just come up.
Well, that's yes, Arthur, you know, engagement, social engagement is important for all of us, but it's especially important for people living with dementia.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, in the people that we knew that had dementia before COVID, there's a pretty sharp decline how people are faring because of the lack of stimulation and a lack of human connection they're having right now.
Definitely, even with the physical health, right? Like, because now gyms are closed and you have very limited access to public space to exercise. There are like, you know, some sort of deterioration in their physical health as well that we noticed recently.
And for some people, you know, their caregivers, because of fear of exposing them, have stopped showing up. So some people, you know, their primary social interactions were from caregivers in support service workers. And so when they're not showing up, there's no one that they interact with physically.
Yeah, I feel like this is especially true for other cultural groups, right? Like, you know, for example, for like Latino families or like, you know, Asian families, they tend to live in like multi-generational household, right? So they really have to do, you know, a calculated risk, like, you know, whether I should like keep my family safe or I should, you know, take the risk, you know, to visit, you know, my loved one who's living with dementia. So those things also like create some sort of existential concerns, right? And it's really stressful. So.
And for caregivers who are getting paid, you know, having to make choices about whether to go to work to get paid because they need the money, and then also have to choose to potentially expose somebody unknowingly.
Yeah, definitely. Especially the reality is that a lot of caregivers themselves already kind of are confronted with issues around like access to healthcare and access to resources, right? So these are like some other you know, extra burdens that they kind of have to consider that most people don't really even think about.
Yeah, it's true.
What ideas do you have then about, especially for people living alone, who are living with dementia or whose caregivers haven't been able to see them in person? What tips or what recommendations or what hopes do you have about interventions so that help people be more engaged during this shelter-in-place period of COVID?
Frequent phone calls are really, you know, they don't have to be an hour or 2 hours long. They can be 5 or 10 minutes, but frequent. The same with visits. You know, visits can happen in a lot of ways that don't put people in contact with other people. They could be through a window, they could be through the door. You know, the person can stand in a doorway and another person can be sitting in their car if they live in a place where one can see each other from the doorway in a car, and you talk on the phone while you're physically looking at each other. That does a lot for our psyches, even if we can't be in somebody's physical presence.
Are there any programs, and this they might not be, where people are able to go in and help or do it remotely, help people set up so they can Zoom, or who get them started on Zoom, working with people with dementia. Is there any program like that available right now?
Open House has tech support. Were you going to say something, Arthur?
Yeah, go ahead, Carrie.
Open House has tech support for people who do have access to the internet and some kind of device, whether it be phone, tablet, or computer, to help people get into programming that Open House provides, or any virtual programming.
I know that Carrie Senior Centers also offers similar programs.
Yes, Caregiver Senior Center is another one, and I think Shanti might have a program too, but I'm not sure. These are all local LGBT senior serving organizations, but it does bring up the issue of the digital divide, and that's certainly true not just for LGBT seniors, but other seniors in general, but especially underserved communities and in rural areas. We hopefully will see some kind of assistance is needed really on a local, state, and federal level to address this issue. Hopefully we can get some help real soon on that end. Well, let's move on to the next question. What are some ways to support a caregiver of someone living with Alzheimer's during the holidays?
I can answer that. I think it's really important for caregivers to take care of themselves and to get the support that they need outside of the relationship they have with the person they're caring for. That can look different depending on if you're a partner caring for somebody with dementia or another family member, or if you're a paid caregiver. It's really important to take time out when you're able to. Maybe there's someone else that could visit somebody through a window or through a door so that you could take a break and do what you need to do for yourself. Get some moments to attend a caregiver support group. Open House has a caregiver support group for people who are caregiving someone with dementia. There's other support groups out there that people can attend virtually to get the care they need. Any kind of respite that one can get is absolutely crucial so that you can continue to have the bandwidth to be present with that person, especially in difficult moments.
I think
those are all good tips. Arthur?
Oh yeah, I was about to say Carrie offers like some really good suggestions, but I just wanted to add that it's also important to kind of acknowledge and show appreciation for our caregivers, because a lot of the time they're kind of under-recognized, especially if you're a family caregiver. Like your family members might kind of take your caregiving as like for granted, right? Like you're the family. I feel like that's especially true for LGBTQ caregivers, right? Because people's perception is that, oh, you're gay, you're not married, you're single, you don't have children, you should take up the caregiving role, right? Like when other siblings are like, oh, I have my own family, I have my own children, I don't have extra time to do that. So a lot of the time, I feel like especially for LGBTQ caregivers, they have, an additional layer of burden. Sometimes they're just like designated to be the caregiver, even without, their permission, or like regardless of whether they actually have the support or have the knowledge to do that. So I feel like, we need to pay some sort of like special attention to this group of folks.
Yeah, and just to add to that, thanks for saying that. Also to just add, if you're in a position to have caregivers come to your home that are paid, that are not necessarily part of your family, it's really important to show them as much appreciation as you can. Pay them a little extra this time of year if you're able to. Give them a little extra time off that's paid. Anything that you can do goes a long way, because caregiving labor is always undervalued. It's feminized labor, and feminized labor is always undervalued in general in the United States. So any amount of appreciation and extra moment of care that you can give to someone who's in a position of caregiving goes a long way.
Absolutely. Or be creative. Like if you don't necessarily have the financial resources, right? Like write them a card, you know, buy them something like a small gift, you know, whatever, by whatever means, right? Because now we're actually talking about how we can like kind of, you know, do something to kind of keep them sane in a way, and actually, you know, have them get a sense of support and like recognition. I feel like that piece is particularly important.
I agree.
Thank you both. Those were great deal of information in what you just imparted. So thank you for that. What about HIV long-term survivors? Is there anything unique about their experience we need to know? Any kind of tips that you can suggest? And if you just speak to that population, that part of the community.
I haven't come across any individuals, you know, living with HIV or HIV survivors, but I saw a documentary recently, I can't remember the name of it, where they interview, you know, several folks who actually experienced the AIDS pandemic back in the days. And a lot of them actually mentioned that, oh, I have all this like, you know, re-experiencing. I kind of felt like I kind of re-experienced the trauma that I experienced during the AIDS pandemic, because it's kind of similar in a way. It's like all about kind of isolation, people who they care about like kind of pass away one after another. So I feel like that also create of like a lot of distress and potentially kind of trigger the PTSD symptoms that, you know, they already have been dealing with, you know, throughout their lives. So, so I feel like I'm not aware of like any particular services available. Maybe Carrie, you can speak a little bit more on that.
Yeah, we, the open house community has a lot of long-term survivors, and it's something that comes up a lot in our conversations with community members, where their post-traumatic stress from living through one pandemic is heightened right now, and the feelings that come up around how the government entities dealt with that pandemic compared to the way they're dealing with this pandemic. And it's really, it can't be overstated how traumatized people are from that time, and how an extra thoughtful thing that you can do for anybody that you know who's a long-term survivor would mean a lot to them. There's you know, things that come up for people right now around how vulnerable they might be, how high risk they might be. And, you know, maybe there's somebody who's normally quite active, but because of their health, they can't go out, and it's re-traumatizing for people.
Well, thank you, Arthur. Thank you, Carrie, for that. What about the trans community, especially trans women of color, who we know are just under attack every day in this country, both their rights and their bodies. And there's that stress, of course, and then if they're living with cognitive impairment or dementia, can you speak to to the issues in that community, and any tips you might have for getting through the holidays and through the rest of the year?
I can say something.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting, now is a good time to point out that today is the Trans Day of Remembrance, to honor trans folks that have passed the past year and beyond, either through murder, suicide. Trans community is, just like you said, Marcy, under attack every day. And I think it's really important for cisgender non-trans folks to really take a moment to think about what what they could do to support trans people in their community. I think right now, because of increased isolation and lack of community support, a lot of trans elders are more likely to decline in this time. Trans elders with dementia are more likely to decline and decline faster. And so, you know, reaching out to Open House, calling the Trans Lifeline is a great way to connect with other people. Open House has trans-specific programming that people can get connected with either over the phone or virtual to reduce that isolation and loneliness, and to just, you know, we're here to remind people you're not alone. We're here to support you.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I mean, I think we want to extend that to the trans community and the HIV long-term survivors that we know both are struggling with trauma, and that we're here for you, and you're not alone, and there are places to call. We're here. Let's talk about building community, right? Building community during the pandemic. How do you go about doing that? How do you, you know, everything's remote. How has that been going in terms of building community? We're not just treading water. That's not my impression. We're really out there connecting to each other every day, helping people, and volunteering. I've just been amazed at the level of volunteerism in the community. I mean, maybe you, Arthur and Carrie, you could speak to that and what that's been like for you and your organizations.
To be frank, it's been kind of challenging because it's like a lot of our programs are actually done virtually, like since the pandemic. And like Carrie already mentioned earlier, a lot of folks, they actually don't have like internet access, or even if they have internet access, they might not necessarily have the technological know-how, you know, on how to like sign on Zoom, how to use Facebook. So one of the things that we do in our organization, but that's not necessarily specific to LGBTQ folks, is that we actually take the initiative to do some wellness calls, really like take an active approach to reach out to folks that are already, you know, in our system. Because sometimes, you know, I feel like for LGBTQ folks, especially if you are also from, you know, have a non-white culture, you're even more hesitant to reach out for support. And for certain, you know, cultural groups, they tend to think that, you know, oh, you know, I shouldn't be, you know, bothering other people. You know, they're busy enough. Because I remember I have some like Asian folks calling in. I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't know if I should call you. I actually struggle, you know, for a while before I actually pick up the phone, you know, and give you a call, because I know you must be really, really busy right now. You probably don't have the capacity to handle me. So that's the other thing that I learned during the pandemic, is that sometimes, like, you know, it's better to be proactive rather than reactive, right? If we see that, okay, these are the tendency that like people, you know, have, like how can we take a more proactive approach to reach out to this group of individuals, yeah, or for help before they ask for help. Because it's like sometimes we never know, right? By the time they actually pick up the phone and try to connect with you, maybe things are already completely out of control. And we definitely don't want that to happen. So sometimes, so what we've been doing is do kind of like a regular wellness calls just to check in with them. It could be 5 minutes or it could be 30 minutes, depending on, you know, what concerns they have at the moment. I feel like it's also the reassurance piece that most people are actually looking for. They just need someone to let them know, you know, it's okay. we're here for you, we're supporting you, you're not alone. I feel like the loneliness and the social isolation definitely took a toll on a lot of folks.
Oh, yes, Arthur, yes, I think being proactive, whether you're an organization or an individual or a neighbor or a friend, and just picking up the phone and calling people and just checking in with them, right? I think that's crucial during this time. That can really it's crucial for the person that's calling, you're connected when you do it. And it's crucial for the person being called. Carrie, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, it's okay. I would just add, thanks for saying that, Arthur. I think you make a lot of really important points. And I would just also echo what you said, Marcy, about volunteerism. One of the things that we've seen at Open House that's really helped build community and keep people afloat during this time is all of the people who are willing to take some time out of their day to go deliver something to somebody's home, to make a phone call, to just let people know that they're not being forgotten about. A lot of people in all of this isolation wonder if anybody's thinking about them, if anybody has even noticed that they're not around anymore. And so taking the time to call people in your community, people that you don't even know, goes a long way. And that's how we build community. We, Open House, like I said, has used a lot of volunteers for things like grocery runs and picking up prescriptions. And if you're a person who has the availability and resources to do that, it means a lot to people who can't leave their homes right now.
Oh, thank you for that, Carrie. Yes, volunteerism is so important to the community. It's one of the ways we build community. In fact. So thank you for that. I see we're actually over time. So I think we should think about one more question for each of you. Is there any last thoughts you'd like to share with our viewers before we close?
I think I would just reiterate that one thing that's really important, I said this earlier, but visiting people with dementia is so important if you're able to from a distance, or calling them or video calling them, however you can do it. People might not remember that you called or that you visited last time, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't make an impact, a positive impact on their mental health. And those that are around that person all the time can see that, even if they don't remember what happened. Frequent, short visits, cards, obviously visits from a distance, if that's a possibility, or just phone calls means a lot to people, even if it's just 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I just want to echo Carrie. Kindness is free, so do that. Like I said, a lot of the time, even though we can, be physically in the same place with them, a lot of time it's that little human touch, right? Every little bit counts. I just want everyone to remember that. You don't have to, spend so much time, throwing a party, a drive-by party or whatever. Just a simple phone call, or sometimes just text message, or like send a person like a note or a card. As long as the person feels they're supported, we're doing our job.
Well, that's great. Thank you both. Thank you both. It was just a pleasure to hear everything you had to say today, all the tips and expertise that you shared with us. Thank you both so very, very much. Deeply appreciated it.
Thank you.
Let me just
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Anna. Let me just say that the staff and the volunteers at the Alzheimer Association are still working remotely and providing programs online and by phone. And so that's all their educational and support programs. And they're in English, Spanish, and Chinese. And there's a monthly schedule posted on our social media, or you can call 800-272-0000. 800-272-3900. Again, that's 800-272-3900, or sign up for our chapter news. And a few special education programs coming up on Facebook Live, our COVID-19 and caregiving webinar that's on November 23rd, and Healthy Living for Your Brain and Body, that's November 24th. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Follow our page to learn more about upcoming programs and live events at facebook.com/Alzheimer's California, one word. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in an upcoming Facebook Live, just let us know. Thanks again, and have a great day, and happy holidays.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.